I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Andy McQuade. Andy is the creator of the TCO Method. He's been working with real estate developers, owners, and operators since 1997, and has been involved in just about every type of project. First, Andy, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today, taking the time out here on a Friday afternoon. I appreciate it.
No, thank you so much. I'm honored to have been asked. It's exciting.
Yeah,
I love
awesome.
your show. So
Awesome. I appreciate that. Let's just start with I want you to tell people your story, your background. We'll definitely get into the TCO method and how that all works. But just give us a little bit about you and sort of where you started.
sure. So let's see. I started working in the industry on the building material supply side 26 years ago. At 17 years old, started driving a forklift at 84 Lumber and sort of got hooked on the industry.
I never got to drive a forklift. I worked in construction so much and never got to drive a forklift. Yeah. I'm jealous.
Oh yeah, no, it was a blast. Especially before it was like legal. New York, you have to be 18. At least at that time you did. I don't know what it is now, but I had no training or anything. They're just like, here, go do this. Like, all right, let's go. And so I did that like the very tail end of my senior year of high school, worked through the summer, went to college. They called me, you're like, hey, can you come in and work weekends? Sure, I'll come in. I'll do some weekends, whatever. And then after a couple of years of doing that, working summers and taking the school year off, they were like, hey, we want you to be an assistant manager starting in 3 months. So if you'd like to withdraw from college and take a full-time job with us, we'd really appreciate it. Okay, I'm 20, or I think I was 19 at the time. I'm like, all right, sure, let's go. So, I was going to a business school in Syracuse, taking business administration, marketing, management courses. I'm like, all right, let's go, let's do it. So I withdrew. 3 months later, I went full time. 3 months later, I was an assistant manager at another store from the one I was working in, and then 8 months after that, I was back at the original store where I started because of some unfortunate circumstances. And then about a year after that, I was a store manager. So I was a store manager working full time, running my own box, complete entrepreneurial control at like 21 years old. It was okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not bad. Not a bad start to your career.
It was okay. I can't really complain. And I did that. I worked for that company for almost 11 years. Bounced around a little bit, ran my store for about a year and a half. Went and ran an outside sales team that did more volume than my store doubled uh, in another city. Dragged my then girlfriend, now wife, and mother of my child with me. And the rest is sort of history. I got a call about 5 years after that I was getting headhunted by the Home Depot to come in as a district manager over Pro as part of their Pro realignment effort from Frank Blake in 2007. So they brought me in at the district level in Rochester, and that's where I cut my teeth in multifamily and real estate investing and all the other stuff. Got my exposure to all the fun that's involved in commercial real estate that doesn't actually involve new construction, and kind of went from there. So did that for 11 years. Ended up with 18 stores across 2 districts by the time I was done, and went to run a outside sales operation for a year with a really big, fancy reclaimed wood manufacturer that was putting stuff into Facebook and Amazon and Mod Pizza and Shake Shacks, you name it. If it had reclaimed wood in it, it was probably some of our stuff. So I did that for a year, and then got a call from one of my old customers from Home Depot. that worked at a really large property management firm that did some low income housing and workforce housing. They had 20,000 doors at the time. A half hour coffee turned into a 3 hour long conversation that ended in, why aren't you doing this full time? It's like, okay. So 2 weeks after that, I filed an LLC. 2 weeks after that, I had all my legal documents and insurance in place. And 30 days later, I gave my 2 weeks, and I've been doing this ever since. So that's what I do now, is I help people make more money in real estate, which is kind of fun. So
Kind of fun for you, but probably more fun for those people that you're helping them make the money. Um, I want to sort of ask you, sort of more about. We'll talk about sort of what when you started to do it full time, but also how that ties into your experiences. But the first thing I want to point out to people kind of listening that struck me from your story is you said yes. You said yes to these opportunities. You said yes to, kind of, it didn't sit around thinking, well, what if this doesn't, what if this, what if I leave college and take this job? Like that's, like people tend to hold themselves back from opportunities by thinking of worst case scenario instead of best case scenario. And I think a lot of times just saying yes, especially when you're young, like just give it a shot. Like what's the worst that could happen? Like you go back to college? Like that's not that's okay. Like that's an okay outcome. So it's just kind of something that resonated with me, just like it really almost kind of all those levels, even the the 3 hour coffee that turned into starting your own business. Like there's a lot of good that comes from just kind of taking that chance and being willing, open to opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. I'm blessed in the career path I chose. Really, the lumberyard thing was not even on my radar. I just happened to fill out an application there, and this guy Chris Martin called me and was like, "Hey, you like turning a wrench?" I'm like, "Yeah, I work on cars and do whatever." He's like, "Well, come in and have an interview. We'll sit down and whatever." And he hired me. And if it wasn't for the mentors that I had and the good leaders I had that really kind of showed me the ropes and taught me, gave me some good work ethic and set a good example, I wouldn't be doing this now. There's no way. And then, I kind of thank some of the bad bosses I had for pushing me in this direction. So, not every career in corporate America goes well. So there was definitely some rocky points in my career where certain people didn't really like how I did things. And honestly, dropping out of college is probably the best thing I could have done, because I was a terrible student. Like I was I have ADHD, wasn't diagnosed, still technically not, found out that my son has it because of me. And then everything for my entire school career made perfect sense. It all just dropped into place. I was like, oh my God, this is me. What is going on? So now that I've been able to kind of put two and two together, like there's all this perspective that I have now that I didn't have then. So like risk taking, saying yes to things, just driving for the next big thing. And when are you going to make me a store manager? When are you going to make me a store manager? When am I getting my own store? When are we doing this? When are we doing that? Like that was me, but that was ADHD, right? So I had no idea at the time. I was like, whatever, ADHD is not real. It doesn't freaking exist. It's bullcrap. Yeah. No, actually, it's real.
Yeah.
I can prove it now.
They're like tiny little mirrors, tiny little.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
See them very much. Find out a lot about yourself by watching what your kids do. You're like,
oh,
where
absolutely.
did they get that? You're like, oh, that's me. That's my
Absolutely.
wife and I do that all the time to each other. It's like they'd be like, did you hear what she said? And I'm like, I don't know where. Or like my son, like, did you hear what our son said? And this happened. Like this is a real story, and I forget even what it was. And I was like, he must have gotten that at daycare. And my wife just bust out laughing. She's like, no, that's me. Like that's straight up me. And I was like, okay, good. Well, it looks like they're just becoming us. So certainly a part of raising kids. But when you the conversation, so I think this is a thing that, again, along that theme of saying yes, you took the coffee that turned into a long lunch, and then you started your own business. What happened in that meeting? Like what kind of came out of that made you sort of inspired you to take that leap?
So I had never really lost touch with my customers. Like I shifted when I shifted from 84 Lumber to Home Depot, like Home Depot is really, really bad at new construction, as far as like deliveries and service and
Yeah.
consistency and quality of product. Just, we just couldn't play in that arena compared to the mom and pops and 84 Lumbers of the world. It just wasn't a thing. So when I left Depot to go to this other company, I still talk to people because they would call me to be like, hey, what do I do here? What do I do there? And I'd only been gone for like a year, so it wasn't a big deal. He called me because he had just taken over the procurement and risk management for the entire company. So all of the procurement functions from everything from every contract they sign for like dumb stuff like lot and grounds and snow plowing and landscaping to everything, every single relationship with 84 Lumber, Home Depot, Lowe's, HD Supply, Wilmar, you name it. That was everything that involved money changing hands outside of payroll and employees ended up on his desk. So he called me because he knew I knew everything that they bought as far as their supply chain through Home Depot and HD Supply because I handled his account for their several hundred properties for probably 4 or 5 years before I left. That was the majority of what I was doing when I was at Depot. Is I had really big. I actually had the biggest multifamily property management portfolio in the country. I had like 35 or 40 customers, but I did about 20 to 22 million a year just with those 40 companies in 17 different states. So I was on planes every 3 weeks. I was dealing with all their headaches. They would buy a property in South Carolina. I would get on a plane, find them a store that was actually capable of handling the business, do the intros, set up the programs, make sure their people had all the stuff they needed to place their orders and communicate and come back. So for him, he was reaching out because he just took this role and just wanted to learn. And it went from a half-hour coffee to a 3-hour conversation where he's basically like, well, where would you start if you were me? And then I just ran off at the mouth for 3 hours about how I would look at the contracts and where I would find the product and what stuff I would look at specifically to make sure the pricing was right. And then, you've got these rebate deals with these vendors. You need to make sure you hit the goals that are in the contract. You're not going to get your rebates in 6 months or a year. Like you got to make sure that you hit this milestone and this milestone. You're communicating to that. And it just was a time suck, but it was a great conversation. And he's like, you should just do this full time. Like, okay, I guess I should.
Yeah.
I guess I
Yeah.
should.
I mean, it's definitely needed. Um, well, the TCO method, I know what it is because you told me when we talked the other day, but will you define that for people and then kind of get in
Sure.
a little bit to you know, what your philosophy is, what you're trying to do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the TCO method, TCO has been around for a really long time. It's not really used a lot in real estate because it's very hard to quantify, but it stands for total cost of ownership. And it looks at pretty much every input and output that impacts your NOI, and in some cases, the money you get to keep as well. After your debt service and all of your cash flow is degraded by all those fun things that aren't actually included in your NOI. And it's kind of a top-down, all-in approach that looks at the what you're buying, who you're buying from, how you operate your maintenance, how you make your decisions, and the whole purpose of it is to get investors. And I it's really built for buy and hold and value add investors. It's built for people who are looking to get into a property and really just max out the cash flow without deferring maintenance, without cutting headcount, like without cutting corners, like do it right and try to see that long-term, long scope payoff. So it kind of takes the entire decision making process for all the stuff involved in operating your properties and it reframes it into what's going to be my total cost of ownership for this. And it's not specific to just the property. It's, well, what's my total cost of ownership for this toilet or, this particular fixture or this type of flooring versus that type of flooring? Or, what's my total cost of ownership of the parking lots and grounds on this property that are completely destroyed when I bought this? What am I going to have to spend to fix it? And then how do I maintain it to make sure I'm not back here in 5 years or 10 years, depending on where you are? Because, if you're up in the Northeast and you get snow and you put salt on those things, if you don't take care of them, you're going to be right back repaving, spending 200 grand, 300 grand every 5 years, which is crazy, but it's your curb appeal. And yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but I mean, you can get super granular with it, but the point isn't to reach that solid number of, oh, I'm going to buy this property for this. I'm going to spend this, and then I'm going to have all these inputs and all this labor and all this maintenance, and I'm going to budget this and this and this, and this property is going to cost me this by the end of the time I'm owning it, and then I'm going to dispose of it. No, that's not really the point to come up with that total number. That the point is to max out your net operating income by making smarter decisions at the beginning, as opposed to just putting a band-aid on something. You're going to put something in there that maybe will pay you back over time instead of just using the same thing and having the same problems 2 or 3 years from now. So over time, what we see is almost everything that I recommend they do in the program, even if they have to buy software to support it, even if they have to do some change management to their processes and stuff internally, almost everything I recommend they do pays for itself within 3 to 5 years. And if you're looking at, the useful life of that space, whether it's commercial, residential, doesn't matter, honestly. If you're looking at the useful life of the space, 5, 7, 10 years, if you can delay an upgrade or an improvement because everything's still working and still in really good condition, despite tenants and despite all the issues that go with it, after 7 or 10 years, and you can just cash flow off your last capital expenditure, why wouldn't you? Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the goal, is to take that, 50 to 54% and maybe bring it down a little bit, but do it without cutting corners like deferred maintenance, getting rid of headcount, ignoring problems, cheaping out on repairs. Like it's not those models. I cringe when I see people who are like, I operate my property at 30%. Well, you're a unicorn. Okay. And I operate at 40. We operate all our properties at 40. Well, cool, because you're creating opportunities for my value add investors later when you've deferred so much maintenance on those things that you need to sell it below market just to get somebody to take it off your hands. So, there's two sides to every story, but I don't generally go in and do anything with anybody who's doing the 30 or 40% models, who's bragging about how little they're spending on their property, because in the long term, deferred maintenance always costs you 2 or 3 or 5 times more than what it would have cost you had you just fixed it when it broke.
Yeah.
So.
Agree 100%. When do you propose that people come to you to sort of formulate this plan? Like, is it at purchase, during due diligence? Is it during ownership, kind of any time? Like what do you think is ideal in terms of sort of coming up with these strategies?
So the biggest bang for your buck is during due diligence, before you close on a property and start reno. If you already own a property and you're going to do a reno, also a really good time to do it. But the process is really like 3 parts. It's some of the reno and rehab, because that's where you're already going to spend the money. So if you spend just a little bit more, but then that pays for the extra you spent plus whatever it was over time, that's a good deal. Mm-hmm. But from a functional standpoint, there's stuff we look at that has nothing to do with products. Like my background in building materials, I can play the game because I've been that was my world for 20 something years, was the supply side. So I know how they sign their contracts with manufacturers. I know the issues with all the products they sell, what their competitors sell. I know how they pay their people and salespeople. I know how they negotiate their deals. I know all their margins on the backside of how much money they make per each product. I know how much margin they need to make to keep the doors open and the lights on, so I can negotiate from kind of that equal level and not just have them blow smoke, which is kind of a nice advantage to have. So I get involved a lot in the like the purchasing and the negotiation and the contracting and the vendor relationship side, because that's where you can see immediate impacts. Like all the other stuff from construction takes time to pay for itself. It's not immediate. But if you go and you negotiate better pricing on product and rebates and service levels that save money, well, all of a sudden then, well, there's your immediate payback, right? And then the stuff in construction, yeah, you can get a discount on it, which is fine. Most people try to go get a discount. Are they getting a real one? Or are they getting one that's, they're just told they're getting? Like, I don't know. I know a lot of people who say they get 35% off on paint, but it's still more expensive than what my customers are paying, right? So
Right.
it's you can put a sticker on something and say I'm getting 35% off. That doesn't actually mean it's the right price. So
Right. You're, you're
there's a
getting
bunch of
35%
parts.
off something that was marked up 50%.
Correct. You got it. Or more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot to it. And then like I don't do cost segregation, but I always say, have you done cost segregation? Are you planning on doing cost segregation? Yes or no? And it's got nothing to do with NOI. That's just what the money they keep.
Right.
And it's the same thing when I ask them, have you done a tax assessment challenge? Are you going to do a tax assessment challenge? Is that something that is on your radar? And yes or no, I have a guy that I work with who has like a 93% success rate in New York State for doing tax assessment challenges. He won't touch a building worth less than a $500,000, but you know, it's better than just continuing to write checks to New York and
Right.
getting no benefit from it.
Right. Right.
So, and he only takes money if he wins. But he works completely on contingency. So why wouldn't you? What do you have to risk? So it's that's also sort of a no-brainer. But then the stuff I get involved in, it's everything from all the contracting and pricing and review. I look at, kind of midterm stuff like what's your risk management look like? What's your compliance stuff? Are you where you need to be to avoid this and this and this? And those are sort of harder to quantify because you don't know if you're going to have a fire. You don't know if you're going to have a slip and fall. You don't know if you're going to have an angry tenant put their fist through a window or complain because, a light fixture is burned out in the hallways. Like that's all stuff that you're going to have no matter what, especially in residential, especially if you're in, B minus and C and D neighborhoods. It's just part of the business. But that doesn't mean that you have to lie down and take it. There's things you can do to work with your insurance company to make sure that when something like that happens, you can say, yeah, no, actually, we have all these things over here set up. So we know that's not actually the case. So, yeah, I mean, there's a ton of parts to it. And it's sort of, since my entire background was, kind of sales, but building materials sales. And I worked really closely with all these C-level leaders and all these huge multifamily, REITs and publicly traded and private. And, I had one client that I worked with when I was at Home Depot that had 35,000 doors. I was in the office with the CEO and the CFO and the COO all the time, having conversations about different stuff in Chicago and Texas and Florida and Pittsburgh and all across New York State. It just kind of went with the territory where they were teaching me the business. And that was the coolest part. That's why I love real estate so much, is because everybody was really down to earth and open and honest. And they weren't like hiding stuff. They weren't like, oh, this is a trade secret. You can't take this. So most of my ideas I stole from my customers over the last 20 years. Like all the stuff. Oh, you're having a problem with that? Well, why don't you try this? This guy tried, this guy was having good luck doing this instead. Like all I did was take all the purchasing, procurement, know-how and knowledge and negotiation stuff and combine it with a couple of things that made sense to do that cut expenses over time. It wasn't rocket science. It's just I see patterns. I like strategy. So I look at stuff I like to take it apart and figure out how it goes. And with all the support I had from people teaching me how they ran their businesses and why they made the decisions they made and how they qualified and quantified their decision making process and what impact that had on their insurance and their how many times they got sued and all of their operational stuff. And this town wants us to do this and this city wants us to do that, and we can't do that here because of XYZ, or this impacts this in this way. It was just a question of taking all of that real estate asset management stuff and blending it together with all the procurement stuff. And then was honestly one of my customers, after I launched my business, that gave me the idea to latch on to total cost of ownership, because I mentioned it in a sales pitch to him. And he's like, and he was a buy and hold value add, right? Multifamily. That was his shtick, still is. And he really connected to total cost of ownership. He was like, oh crap, that's right. That's a really good point. And then he just started asking questions about how total cost of ownership tied into all these other things that I was talking about. And it turned, and it was, there's stuff in there about opportunity cost and how, doing this and this can save money over time down the road. And, putting this in doesn't just cut this utility and this sewer bill, but it also impacts, and reduces maintenance, service calls to the apartment because of, this and this situation. you can't use it here because of bad venting, so you got to upgrade to this size or whatever it was. Very technical, and half of my job as a sales guy was to be able to do the not technical stuff for the C-level people to say, this is how I'm going to save you money and reduce your maintenance, and you buy this from me and the world will be roses and butterflies. And then the technical side with the maintenance crews and the installers and the warranty stuff, if something went wrong, that was all on me. So like Home Depot was a nightmare as an employee because they didn't want reps involved from any manufacturer anywhere. They wanted all that money to go to them, and they made all the problems our problems. So I learned more about more things that went sideways on installs and manufacturing defects and just quality issues, if there were any, how to identify if something was installed correctly. Like every complaint that we ever got that involved one of those big corporations that was spending X number of dollars from Home Depot, whether they were one of my multifamily people or not, was my headache. So I learned more technical crap than I ever imagined I would learn working for a store like that. And it wasn't because Home Depot was teaching it. Don't get me wrong. This was like calling the vendor on the phone and being like, tell me what the heck is going on, because I have no idea. You need to teach me this because this is all Greek to me. And I was selling everything. You name an interior thing, I probably sold it to somebody somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like you're in that regard kind of a translator, right? If you've got to make the connections between the executives and then the sort of boots on the ground contractors, there's someone who can speak both languages, I think, is really an important go-between, because I mean, I'm sure there are some executives that do understand construction, but there's a lot of them that just don't know what goes into it, and so they're being able to kind of talk to them about it, and then also understand what's going on at the level of the contractors and the vendors is hugely valuable. What's the process like if someone wants to work with you and sort of use your the TCO method? Like how walk us through kind of what they would do, how that obviously reach out to you, but like what does it kind of look like for one of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the bigger projects get started like at the ground floor, acquisition or pre-construction, pre-renovation, whatever it is. And I do some adaptive reuse stuff. So there's sometimes when I'll get a call and I'll walk an empty office with no walls and just pillars that it's wide open, and it's like 300 feet wide by 150 feet deep, and it's just floor after floor of nothing. But most of the time it's a phone call, email, text, if they've already worked with me. Hey, meet me here on this date. I'll participate in a due diligence walk or rehab walks to kind of identify where opportunities are. And I don't do the typical due diligence stuff. Like I don't care about the numbers. That's somebody else's problem. I don't care about what their budgets are. I look for the things that I know are going to impact them over time. And so I advise them on that. But so usually there's like a discovery phase, whether it's that or an existing portfolio. So I do both. They both kind of start the same way with just boots on the ground, trying to figure out what's happening. So whether it's looking at their existing operation and who they're buying from and what they're buying and what their spec is, if there is one, and kind of how organized and coordinated their efforts are, or completely chaotic and all over the place they are. I've seen everything from really good advanced Yardi systems using, Voyager 7 and full implementation of everything, to here's some Excel spreadsheets, a QuickBooks report, and a box full of receipts. Like I've done both. I really don't like the latter of those two options. Like I'm not a fan of Yardi. Yardi is such a pain in the butt to get information out of, because everybody's setup is different and everybody uses it in a different way, and nobody uses everything correctly or completely. So it's kind of like pulling teeth at first, but I mean, it's a solid system. And there's dozens of other ones out there that I've seen and worked with and tried to get information out of. But there's always the discovery phase. And a lot of it comes down to, and in that part, I go through and I just make recommendations like, okay, so you're buying from like 47 different vendors. You've got no buying power anywhere. You need to figure that out. You've got all these operational processes for how you handle your maintenance calls and how you handle your capex and how you handle, this process and that process. Do you have any idea what any of those cost you? And usually they're like, oh yeah, well, I pay them, $25 an hour, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that's what's their total comp. And then they look at me like, what's total comp? And, bigger corporations, they know what I'm talking about. Mom and pop guys with, who've been in it for 10 or 15 years, or even 40 years, honestly. But if they're mom and pop operations with a few hundred doors, or maybe they manage up to, six or 700, they're not into the process costing stuff. So my corporate background with all of the improvement projects and pilot tests and all that other stuff that I had to go through on that side kind of taught me how to do a boots on the ground change management program to get people onboarded and figure out what everything costs so that we can actually see if it's worth doing or not down the road. So we try to figure out what all their maintenance costs actually are, like from taking the phone call to entering it in whatever system to the guys going to check it out to not having the parts or having the parts, going to the store or ordering it online, doing whatever they do, go back, install. Like we try to quantify all that stuff into a number, and then we try to find all the places where they're literally lighting money on fire, like just dumb low hanging fruit. But the reality is that for a lot of these operators, they're so in the business and doing the same thing all the time. They're going from one fire to another. They don't see that they're lighting, $60,000 a year on fire in windshield time and just ordering from the wrong places and going back to check repairs 3 different times and not having this in stock, not buying in bulk. There's so many pieces to it. And I've never walked into 2 operations and seen the exact same issues. Like they all have pieces and parts and there's always patterns, but it's never the same thing on 2 properties, let alone 2 different portfolios. So it's pretty much everywhere. And nobody's doing everything right. But nobody ever does. There's always opportunity. There's always room to improve. And I still learn stuff. I go places and I'm like, I've never seen this before. What is this? What are you doing? Why is that? Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's like it's saving them a ton of money. Other times it's like, this is adding so much time to your day. Is it actually paying for itself? Like, why are you doing this? But sometimes those questions don't need to be asked. So we start with that evaluation and then we turn it over to the owners and say, okay, here's everything that we see. What do you actually need help doing? Like, I will come in and I will help you figure this stuff out. I will help you negotiate. So then we go into like phase 2, which is actually breaking down and starting to either negotiate with vendors if that's what they want to do, or getting involved in helping them write specs so that they have some consistency between properties so that they can leverage some of that buying power and draw down the expense for whatever it is they're doing, whether it's maintenance, whether it's capex, whether it's a reno, just creating systems that maybe they don't have, or maybe that they once had and fell apart, or maybe that they have but just need tweaking. But there's always some sort of operational synergy that can be built by just focusing on what that actual process costs, because sometimes it costs you more to just put a band-aid on something and fix it as fast as possible for as cheap as possible, as opposed to just taking a minute to go, wait, hold on. You could just do this and spend this a little bit more or do this a little bit differently, and you would immediately start to save. So there's an opportunity cost number that we inject, and opportunity cost is not something that's used a lot in real estate unless you're talking about acquisitions and disposition. So I look at the opportunity cost on like processes, like what could your people be doing for you to help you earn more money, add to your NOI, manage this better than they're doing now. But because they're running around like chickens with their head cut off, putting fires out constantly, they don't have the capability to do that. So what is that effort costing you? Like if you're a small operator and you've got a leasing agent, office manager that also has to deal with the maintenance calls and the headaches, you probably don't want to hire an extra body just to manage maintenance calls and headaches. So you're losing all of this functional time to fill units and do the books and help you make money that are being caused by extra headaches coming into the office because of maybe cheaping out on a product or hiring a cheaper labor or just doing something incorrectly because you've been doing it that way for 40 years and it's just without question always the way you've done it, or just not looking at it. But the problem is that in probably 90% of operations, people know what they're fed. What people bring them and tell them is what they understand and know, because they're so busy doing stuff. They don't take the time to go outside the box to find new and better ways of doing business unless it's handed to them. So when people use the same vendors and the same products for 25 years, it's not because maybe they like it. They probably know about the issues, but they probably don't know that there's something better down the road because they don't have the time to go look for it. And in real estate, especially, stuff changes hands so fast. Most of the salespeople out there are not aware of who owns what. So, like, if you have a traveling salesperson from one of the catalog companies like HD Supply, Wilmar, or whatever, they're bouncing around talking to maintenance people who aren't decision makers. They are just salespeople. They probably have no idea actually of half the stuff that they're talking about or trying to sell. They're told to show up and take orders, and that's what they do. So there's never any type of collaboration. So like modern procurement theory is a big part of the TCO method. So there's no like vendor collaboration, there's no teamwork building, there's no innovation coming from the vendor saying, hey, you guys are doing this. You should really be looking at products X, Y, and Z or service X, Y, because this is what it's going to do for you in the long run. This is the stuff you should be using. And this is why, and here's the impact. That doesn't happen. Like, that's how I sold. But I also saw a lot of my competitors out there doing stuff, and it was never that level of conversation, partially because I don't think they understood the business and partially because I don't think they cared. And there was plenty of guys out there who were really good at what they did, but at the end of the day, you're being paid by your employer to sell what they tell you to sell. And that's what you do. I was sort of weird because I would walk in and say, yeah, I'm not selling that to you because it's crap. Buy it from this guy because ours is garbage. And I would piss my bosses off something fierce. But I'm not going to sell you something that I have to fix the fires, put out the fires, and do the headaches. I don't have that kind of time. So that was kind of my shtick. So I approach it from that level for everybody. And because now I see so many sets of books and so many different operations and so many different products being used, I literally just steal ideas from my customers and give them to other customers. That's half of it. This is working really well here. Why aren't you using it? Right. So like 20 years ago, when people were shifting off of sheet vinyl to luxury vinyl plank, and I mean, back then the luxury vinyl plank was not what it is today by any means. It was not great, but it was overall it was cheaper than sheet vinyl, right? So it was a conversion through, well, you're throwing half of what you're buying away, and then you're spending 3 times the labor to get it ready to actually install it correctly, or you're just not installing it correctly and you're going to replace it in a year. So why don't you just switch to this stuff, lay it on top? It goes in one day or a couple hours. There's no waste, and your guys are in and out in 3 hours. Oh, wait, so I'm going to save on labor. I'm going to save on this. I'm not going to have to replace it every year. You can drag appliances across it and tables and furniture, and it doesn't rip. Yes, all those things. Oh, cool. Yeah, let's do that. But if they wanted to buy the sheet vinyl, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm good. I don't want to sell that to you. Go buy it from Sherwin-Williams.
Yeah. Well,
So
and that's going to be, I mean, that's why customers stayed in touch with you, right? It's like, I mean, that's exactly it, right? You weren't looking at it from a perspective of, I need to get this one sale. I need to, make this, whatever it is, one commission check. It was more, you're actually helping the clients, creating a value and being, sort of relational so that they come back to you and they sort of do it over and over again.
Right. And that was a lot of it. The other thing was I didn't have really commission to worry about at Home Depot. It was a salaried role that bonused off of the performance of the company in the district. So for me, it was I could go out and be a good advisor and be a partner to these companies. And I didn't have the how am I going to put food on my table next week pressure. I had I just need these guys to grow what they do with me every year. That was my goal. So that's what I focused on. It didn't have to be everything in the store because even as a homeowner, I won't buy everything from Home Depot. Are you kidding me? Same thing with Lowe's, same thing with Menards, same thing
Yeah.
with any of these vendors. It's like, no, they don't all have the right stuff for what I want, what my standards would be. So
Yeah. But even, I mean, commission or not, what you just said about I want them to do more with me the next year, like you're just looking at it as a long-term relationship rather than kind of that one moment in time right in front of you. So you said, sort of there's the discovery phase, and then that, I guess you could call it implementation or whatever, where you're sort of putting all those things into practice. So are you do you kind of like guide people from start to finish, or is it pretty
it depends on
customizable?
it's totally customizable. So it depends on what their goal is. So if they have the internal resources and the time to dedicate to a project, then I'll just give them the list. And sometimes there'll be an agreement that if they need help with something, they can call me and I'll charge them like an hourly fee or whatever. I've had customers just say, Andy, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want my guys dealing with this. I want them to just worry about leasing units and labor. You buy everything. I don't care what it is. Find it. Tell me what it needs to be,
Right.
and get me the orders, and I will write the checks. Like, okay, sure, I'll do that. And then, I just had to coordinate with the delivery services and the subcontractors and the whatever. But um, I can be as involved or uninvolved as they want. There's always a little bit of discomfort from field personnel when I get involved because there's a little bit of, well, who's this guy and why is he telling me what to do? Or who's this guy and he's making me look bad because he's getting all this stuff for different prices and now there's standards and I can't just buy what I want. And so there's always like some change management headaches. There's always some onboarding stuff, but it's like, no, man, I'm trying to make your life easier. Okay. So I don't want you running around like a chicken with your head cut off, getting yelled at for all of this stuff. If we just simplify everything for you, so you don't have to worry about all these different things in your inventory, you don't have to keep track of all of this stuff. We're going to try and find a way to automate it. You don't have to deal with 47 different vendors. We're going to cut you down to like 10 vendors. And, we're going to help you save money. We're going to make you more efficient. We're going to make you look like a freaking hero. Like that's really more the direction we want the conversation to go, but there's always people who feel threatened by highlighting all of these opportunities. And it is understandable. So I don't go in and work with like individual property managers, leasing managers, maintenance people, anything like that. Like I have to start at the top of the company because there's no chance I'm going to get through those gatekeepers and those guardians at the lower level because
Right.
they're always afraid it's going to cost them their job. And like I've never
Right.
had a single person involved in this process get canned or had a labor reduction or any of that kind of stuff because of tuning this up. Like there's definitely been people who've been fired, but not from anything that had to do with the actual process. Like I
Right.
had a leasing manager disappear on a 700 unit complex like halfway through a project a couple of years ago. It's like, okay, but it didn't have anything to do with me, so I guess we're
Right.
good.
It wasn't at your hand that.
Mm.
um I mean, it's very cool, very fascinating. And we talked about it before this recording, and I think it's just a very needed service. um I'm gonna switch gears here so we can both have some Friday away from the desk, but I'm going to switch gears. I think we'll be talking about it more eventually, but switch gears to sort of the questions I ask every guest. And
Yeah.
so the first one is always, it's based on the name of the show being Know Your Why. So what is your why? What drives you? What kind of keeps you going and looking for new and higher levels of success?
Um, so there's a couple of things. One is I came from really kind of a weird background. Both my parents were born in the 30s. I'm only in my early 40s. Both my parents were in their 30s. My siblings are all 20 years older than me. Um, I have nieces. I have a niece who's 6 years younger than I am. And we never really had a lot of money growing up. My dad was an entrepreneur. He wasn't very good at it. I think we've heard this story before from like a million other people, but my dad was like my inspiration as a kid. He works from home. He does all this cool stuff. He was working for all these big companies like Arm and Hammer and IBM and doing all this neat stuff. And then as I got older, I figured out, he's really not very like, the more I've done in business, more I'm like, God, I loved him, but wow, he was not good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my perspective comes from working in corporate America and managing teams and growing business and doing all the crazy stuff I've done. And like, he was a great guy, but he was not a great salesman. He liked doing what he did, but he didn't really push for more. And it impacted, my parents' finances, and they scrimped and saved to send me to good high school, private elementary school. There's Catholic schools for both, but they're very good schools. If I had known then what I know now about relationship building and networking, I'd probably be further ahead in my career than I am. But I was sort of a lone wolf all through school. I was that dorky ADHD kid that everybody thought was a weirdo. So, it definitely impacted me a little bit. I have more hobbies than I can shake a stick at, just because my ADHD took me from one thing to another. But then the hyper focus put me into that mode where I wanted to be an expert in it. And it's the same thing with my career. But the nice part about real estate was there was people like me who were just in it, and they loved it, and they wanted to share what they knew, and they wanted to take people under their wing and teach them. And I got lucky. I mean, I really did. I have no idea where I would be if I'd ended up in real estate. So, that's
Awesome.
that. My why is I like helping people. I like running my mouth, unfortunately, for better or worse. But I like helping people do better and do more. And I realize I'm not the guy to help everybody. That's not why I'm here. But I don't want, my now ADHD son, who is medicated and doing much better in school than I ever did. Uh, um,
Fascinating how that'll
I don't
work.
want him to end up in the same struggles that I had and not understand why things are the way they are and why people look at me or look at him the way they do if he's getting late in the day and his medication is wearing off and he's getting crazy. Like, here, this is why, and you just need to take a breath and take a step back, and here's the coping mechanisms that worked for me, and I hope they work for you. But you're 10, so you're not even listening to what I say, and we'll get to it later when you're a little older, but I'm going to keep reinforcing it so that you have the tools that I never had. So there's a lot of that too, where like he's already investing in real estate. He has money in self storage with a buddy of mine in Mississippi. He's had it there since September of 22,
Very smart.
and he loves it. He loves when the check shows up every month. It's like, it's a simple interest. We're trying to keep him so he doesn't have to file a tax return. So it's like $20 a month that shows up on an interest payment. He's happier than a pig in,
Yeah.
every time that check shows up, but it gets him skin in the game. And now he's like, oh, is Scott going to be at the meeting? Can I go? Like, you want to go to a real estate investors meeting with a bunch of freaking people at a bar? Are you kidding me? He's like, no, I want to go. All right, we'll go. Let's go. And I'll leave at 8 o'clock and bring him home. Like, it just is what it
Awesome.
is. It's part of it, but I don't want him to have the same roadblocks and the same, I guess, scarcity mindset ideas about money that I had as a kid, because I was
Yeah.
constantly like inundated. Well, oh, we can't afford that, or oh, we can't do this, or oh, we can't do that. And we don't spoil him, but we're not beating the fear of investing, and we're not trying to teach him that he's going to become rich by putting money in his mattress. Like, those are not the lessons that are true. But my parents came from the Depression. Like, that was how I was raised, for better or worse, and it took me a long time to get through that. Like, I was a W-2 guy for years, making six figures in upstate New York, which is huge money,
Yeah.
and I had no idea what to do with it. I was a moron.
Yeah.
So
Well, most of us
now I
are.
know better.
Most of us are not born with that knowledge. Um, that's very cool. You brought up a lot of different hobbies, and it's funny. It's sort of a perfect segue into the second question, which is, tell us about something about yourself that isn't common knowledge, special skill, hobby, something like that. Maybe you have lots of them, but you can pick a couple. Tell us what you
God, I don't
enjoy.
know. I don't know. I work on cars. Like, I still change my own oil because I'm deathly afraid somebody's going to screw up my car. Like, I don't know. Like, there's different things. I find ways that help me focus. So I guess a good example is, like, we have a wood burning stove in the house. And we've had it since we bought this place. I had to replace it a few years ago. Got a really nice Pacific Energy one. The thing is sweet. It's like 94% efficient. It's sick and it's beautiful, but it takes firewood. So I actually sadly enjoy splitting and stacking my own firewood. And it, like, I will come up with more good ideas doing stuff like that, like mowing the lawn, chopping and stacking firewood. My brain never stops, like the ADHD thing. Your brain's always going. Doesn't matter whether you're medicated or not. It just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And there's always ideas. And I carry a little, of course, it's not here, it's in my truck, but I carry a little, oh no, it is right here. Haha, I carry a little leather book. And when I have good ideas for stuff for business or whatever, I'll write it down and I will just like be working away and I'll be like, oh crap, that's a really good idea for a podcast topic. Or, oh crap, that's a really good idea for a blog entry. Or, oh, I got to do this and this and this. And it'll just let me brain dump, but I can work through that stuff when I'm just doing mindless physical labor. Like chopping firewood's a no-brainer, stacking firewood's a no-brainer, mowing the lawn is a no-brainer, but it gives me time away from everything else to focus and just get through it. So those are, like, everybody's like, oh, what is your time worth, blah blah blah, and I did a podcast on that, so I'm sorry. Okay, I'm very disappointed in myself. It is what it is. But for me, it's worth the time because some of my best ideas and my best motivations come from when I'm just alone, just grinding away on physical activity. And some people do, they do the running thing or they do the treadmill or they, stair climbers or whatever. And that gets them into that same kind of zone. For me, it's just getting something that accomplishes something that needs to be done around the house that I can just zone out. And then hobbies, like I used to play video games and stuff. I don't really have time anymore. Um, I love hardware. So like every few years I'll get an itch to like upgrade a computer or something. I'll build it from scratch. Like I'll
Okay.
buy the motherboards and the RAM and the processors and all the super high-end weird cooling implements and massive cases, and I'll slap it all together and test it. And knock on wood, I've never had one not work first time through. Uh, so there's that. But it's a fits and starts thing. Like I don't keep up on it until I'm ready to build a new one, and then I do the hyper focus thing, and I research deeply, and I spend the ridiculous amount of money to put it together, and then I don't think about it again for 7 years until it starts bothering me. Something goes wrong with it. It gets slow. It's outdated. Like it would be different if I played games. It's like I record my podcasts on OBS and crunch it in Adobe, and that's as much work as this thing gets. But it could play whatever you want if you had time to play games.
Right. Right. It's there for you if you need it, which that's the
Correct.
key.
Right.
It's
The
right. It's
option
there if
is
you need
there.
it. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that the point about there is a lot about, people talk about, what's your time worth? You shouldn't go grocery shopping. You shouldn't chop wood, whatever it is. Like, it's like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're high level, you shouldn't do those things. But I think that there's a, there is something to be said for finding something where your mind can quiet itself a little bit. And it's like, oftentimes, like you said, you're going to have good ideas. You might think more clearly than when you're in sort of work mode, which means I got to get this done, like so many things. And you're thinking about so many things that taking that activity, and I actually really enjoy chopping wood as well, but I live in LA and the city, so it's not really it's really not very
That's what camp
applicable,
is
but
for.
it is it is a fun but like for me, that's what the gym is, right? Like
Right.
that's what exercise is like a time to go and let my body take over a little bit, I guess. Maybe, I don't know what the
Yeah.
best way to put it is, but just, get some, it's like if you work your body hard enough, then probably your mind can't be doing all the things that it does when you're sitting at a desk or whatever, right? So
Right.
it's like, if you can take that focus and put it somewhere else, it helps you just calm down a little bit, I think, and settle. So I completely understand what you mean by, when you're saying that. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Check out my website. It's just andymcquade.com. McQuade. It's really easy. All one word, no hyphens, no dashes, no nothing. It used to be a really crappy blog site, and then I decided it would be cool to write a book. And then somebody was like, well, if you're going to write a book, you have to have like an author page with an about me. And then it sort of turned into oh, well, here's all of the other things that people have asked me to do. that's not the TCO method. Like the TCO method's on there and it's kind of like a primary thing, but now it's like all this other consulting that I do that has nothing to do with real estate in some cases, and some of it does, and some of it's coaching. And like a month ago, I had a buddy that I've known for years just reach out and be like, "Hey, um, do you do coaching?" I'm like, "What? No." He's like, "Would you be willing to?" I'm like, "I don't know, maybe."
Sure.
So I've like figured that out. Like I called my attorney and I'm like, what do I need to do to switch this up? And then I called my insurance company. I'm like, am I covered if I coach somebody on something? Because like I know I've got like management consulting stuff, but I do all this project management stuff and all this weird procurement, building materials stuff. So my insurance policy is so weird. I had to shop it. Nobody in New York carried it. It's like half from Ohio and half from California. It's the dumbest thing, but it's because my what I do is so odd. And they're like, yeah, you're fine. Don't worry about it. And like, if you decide to, actually like get the book published, then we're gonna have to talk about a different policy for that. All right, fine. That's great. But as long as I'm good for now, I can like do this. So I started a mastermind locally. It's hopefully I'll have like 4 or 5 guys. I've got about 3 lined up now, plus myself. And it's just like it's nothing big. It's just accountability. And I need it because I'm the ADHD guy. So like I need goals, I need deadlines, I need things set for me. Everything has to be in my calendar or it doesn't happen. Like it I need that like follow-up accountability. I'll be like, I'll do it later. It's a procrastination thing. And I know it. And I know it's a weakness. So it's like if I'm gonna do it, it won't really cost anything. It's just gonna pay for the cool restaurants we go to and the food we eat and whatever. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, that's awesome. Andy, final question for you. I'll let you're certainly a unique guest in what you do. So typically I ask people what advice would you give to someone who wants to get started in real estate? But sometimes I'll just put a little bit of a spin on that and just the question can be, get started in whatever, in business. You can use real estate if you want, but sort of encouraging someone to see that here's your story and sort of inspired and thinks, this guy's doing some cool stuff. Where would you tell them to start?
Um, honestly, for real estate, and I'll tackle that one first. I do a lot with the local real estate investors organization. Like we just turned over the entire old board, put in all new board, put in all new officers. The old board had been doing it for almost 12 years and they were burned out. COVID hit. They were all retirement age. They didn't want to deal with the Zoom and the technology. I stepped in. I was like, I will help you guys run this. Like I just launched my own business. I just lost a $40,000 job in Chicago that I can't go to now because I can't get on a plane. So let's figure this out and I'll work for you guys for like nothing and we'll just get this thing up and running and do it. And so the TCO method idea actually came because I'm doing all this consulting for these big property management firms and I have nothing for the RIA. But I'd been going to that RIA since I was a Home Depot guy as the rep for national RIA and Home Depot's relationship. So it was like kind of a no-brainer to help them out. And now that there's like a whole new crowd, they're all under 40, they're all full-time investors, they're all like in the game and they're busy trying to expand their reach and their business. The networking and the value that's added, like get to a real estate networking event every single week and just learn and get ideas and hang out with people who are in it, full time trying to make a living, not really dealing with the excuses and stuff. Like they're dedicated to doing it right. And it's a nonprofit RIA, so I'll qualify that. Nobody's there trying to become a millionaire and sell $40,000 courses for himself. Like that's not this particular group. Like I don't like those groups. They drive me nuts personally. But if you run one and you're listening to this, more power to you, buddy. Love it. But
No, just little disclaimer under that. Sorry,
yeah,
gurus. Sorry.
pretty much. But no, seriously, get out, network, do what you need to do. Like for me, I had some bad bosses in my tenure, like not so much on the 84 lumber side because I was probably too dumb of a kid to realize good boss versus bad boss, other than like, these people really helped me and mentored me, and those were good bosses. And then the other people were just sort of there. Had some bad bosses that wanted to fire me at Depot. And some of them came to me and apologized to me afterwards, after I was like, number 8 in the company and crushing everything for 3 years straight. But um, they got me reading and branching out to doing consulting. So like I bought my first consulting book in like 2011 And I started being like, oh, I could probably do something like that. I wonder what it would be. And I fall back on all my background. And originally, I wanted to consult and sell services to vendors doing, warranty claim examinations and traveling around taking care of problems for them. And I'm like, that's a terrible job. Why would I do that? But that's in hindsight. Like when I was in 2011, I was like, that could be really cool. That would be a really good idea. Probably a moneymaker. But now I'm a little bit further along, and I've been doing this for 4 years. So now I'm starting to branch out into things that will bring me passive income, and I don't just have to work to make my money. Like I'm not a cheap date, but I don't want to have to constantly do everything myself and just keep grinding through it. But I'm the weirdo that's got all this knowledge, and how do I monetize that? And then the RIA, actually, one of the people at the RIA was like, have you gotten one single sale from your vendor membership here? I'm like, no, not one. He's like, dude, you've been here for like 10 years. That's like $4,000. I'm like, well, some of that was Home Depot, so that doesn't count. But but he's like, well, how do we get you anything? I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know. And that's really where the TCO method came from. I was like, I'm taking all these things and combining them, and I have all these frameworks and stuff. Yeah, I should write a book. And maybe I should like teach courses or something. I don't know. Like it's useful information. Maybe I can pass it on to the smaller guy who can't afford to bring me in and pay me $5,000 a month to help them with their operation. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's potential there for me to just monetize something and sell one-off consulting services that don't involve a 14-page contract or an additionally insured certificate and all this other craziness that goes into what I do when I run my business. Like my literally my MSA is 14 pages plus the scope of work. Like it's stupid, but it's got everything in it that covers my butt and the customer's butt and confidentiality and like all the stuff that has to go in when you're literally in people's books at the C-level across multiple people competing with each other. Like there's no good way to do that without a crazy contract, at least in New York.
Yeah, no,
so
that makes sense. I think you're getting high level access to sensitive information. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of important legal pieces to make sure that is kept confidential.
Mm-hmm. For better or worse, nothing's ever gone wrong yet. So I guess that's good.
Good. Well, Andy, this is awesome. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing your story, sharing what you do. I think, like I said, it's incredibly valuable, to operators and anyone really looking to maximize what's going on with their assets. I think it makes a lot of sense to have you as a consultant and sort of use your services. So thank you for coming on and sharing that with us. I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you asking me. It's fun. I like the program, and I love like the Simon Sinek why books. Like that was one of my first, like when he first started coming out and I was just getting ready to leave Home Depot, I was like, oh, this is really good stuff. Too bad it doesn't apply when the motto is, what have you done for me recently? But I like where this is going. And then like Leaders Eat Last came out, and I was like, oh, this is good stuff. I gotta get better at this because I don't know that I've ever dug this deep. So I think I saw your podcast on LinkedIn, maybe 6 months before we made contact, before you reached out to me. And I was like, this guy's actually, he's doing good stuff. I like it. So I'm happy.
I enjoy it. I think it's just fun for me, right? Just get to hear what, when I started listening, before I started this podcast, listening to other people's podcasts, it was always the part that resonated with me the most. Cause you can only talk about, acquisitions so much. You can only talk about capital raising so much. You can only, like, all that stuff's important and they're very, very valuable skill sets. But like at the end of the day, you're going to hit hard days and you need something that keeps you going. And to me, that was always when people would tell their story on podcasts, like that's where I would perk up. And I was like, okay, that's what I need to, sort of hone in on here. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And folks listening, I know you're gonna get a ton of value out of this episode. Please like, rate, and review. That gets us more great episodes or more great guests like Andy. Thank you very much.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists
that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.